Imagination. Good question. The imagination is the most powerful gift that human beings have been given when they were given life. And it is so automatic, it's so ingrained, it's such a part of us that we completely ignore it. It's rather like the fact you don't, whenever you step foot outside the house, think, oh my goodness me, look at the oxygen, look at the nitrogen in the air. You just don't think that. You just walk to the street, you don't even think of the air unless it's especially windy or especially cold. You don't pay any attention. The air just around you, ignore it. Well, it's rather the same with imagination. It's something incredibly ignored. And I'm going to give you my first quote now, which is that reality leaves a lot to the imagination. And that's one that John Lennon came up with, and he's giving us a little hint there when he says reality leaves a lot to the imagination. Because the remarkable thing about the way the world is constructed is it's so amenable to our imagination. So let's give you some real hard examples of what the power of the imagination does. There was a Scotsman called James Watson who was watching a tea kettle, and he was watching the lid as the tea kettle boiled, bobbing up and down. That bobbing up and down motion gave him an idea. Next thing you know, the steam engine was invented and the whole world's got railways running all over. That's an example of someone using the imagination to create something and thereby change the world. Here's another example. A scientist, and this gives a bit of an indication about how science is really done, because he was just relaxing one evening after a good dinner, sitting by the fire. This would have been in about the 19th century, and he was just allowing himself to drift. He had no agenda, he wasn't trying to do anything. In fact, he was just content to be as he was. And in that moment, what he did is he got a vision, and he saw molecules dancing in a ring. Now, if you or I had seen that, we might think, so what? But this guy was a chemist, and he knew he'd been given the answer to a problem that had been besetting him for years, which is how can you make a really wide range of organic chemicals? The answer is you join the molecules together in rings, and that's what he does. And that's what is the foundation of all organic chemistry. That comes from the man's active imagination. So imagination can literally transform our planet in terms of what we're able to do, in terms of science, for example, and engineering, technology. Those are the kind of examples that people are more familiar with. Well, now it's time to move towards the more unfamiliar, which is how come the shamanic healing works. Well, it works on exactly the same principle. It's called active imagination. It's the same as the other things we've been talking about. Now I'll give you a second quote, and this one says, knowledge is limited, the imagination encircles the world. And I'm particularly pleased about that wording, encircles the world, and that was Albert Einstein, one of the authors of perhaps the most significant quotes that we've ever had come out of a human being. Remarkable. If you add up all these quotes together, you get an interesting picture. So that one is, knowledge is unlimited, and imagination encircles the world. And this idea of imagination encircling the world is really accurate in terms of the work that the shamans do, and particularly the work we do with the universal soul retrieval. We can work on anyone anywhere in the world. There's no limitation with our active imagination on this one. And it's literally the power of our active imagination that enables us to go into the energy matrix of a human being at their request, see what's going on, which is what we do in the health check, work out exactly what needs to be dealt with, and then if the person consents and they would like to have the work done, we can then do the work. And yes, I've given you the answers to the question. The question is, how do you do the work? The answer is, in the same way as we've been talking about this with the active imagination. So let's break the word down. The word imagination actually is coming from two roots, and the first one is the I, which is the first letter of the word, and then the second part of the word is the word mage, and it literally means, imagination means literally I am a magician. That's what it means in terms of literal translation. So it's an amazing word. All human beings have the power to imagine what they like. I'll give you another example. A friend of mine had a really clear picture of what kind of car he wanted. He just allowed his active imagination to create exactly the features he wanted in this car, and then this is the important bit, he just let it go. Next thing you know, a bit of time goes by, and next thing you know, he's got exactly the car he'd imagined for himself. So it's all down to the active imagination again. So we can use this in our daily lives. It's how all spiritual healing works, and it's the way all the significant inventions have ever been produced since the history of the beginning of human race. So When you think of imagination, I'm going to contrast this with what you might have come across at school. Looking out the window, small child at school, the teacher shouts, "Oi, pay attention, stop daydreaming." What is daydreaming but a form of active imagination? So here's my rub. This is the main point I want to make. We've been conditioned to believe imagination is rubbish. Imagination is useless. Imagination is just wasting of time. And yet that's how all the great scientists have come up with their inventions. It's how all the healers do their work, and it's how ultimately you get what you want when you clarify what it is that you want. When you put it off into your imagination, you imagine exactly what it would be like in as much detail with as much emotion as possible. Bingo, you'll get your result. It might not come exactly when you expect it to. Often there's a little time delay with these things, but that's the way it works. And the wonderful thing about the shamanic work is because the work is dedicated for the benefit of other people, there's no time delay. You do the work, you get the result. A couple of quotes for you. "The man who has no imagination has no wings." And that's from Muhammad Ali, one of the most famous boxers of the 20th century. And my last quote for you: "Imagination rules the world," and that's by no less a person than Napoleon. So there you have it. It just shows how powerful the imagination is, and how it's something that we could do with paying more attention to, and allowing it to serve us even better than it already does. Thanks very much.